Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's like exactly 3 o'clock on the 26th of June, 2025. It's Thursday. And, well, the news lately, it all pales in comparison compared to the war we were just watching between Iran and Israel. Yeah, but a lot of the aftermath is coming out from that war. And there's still a discussion on who won. Did those nuclear sites get destroyed or did they not? Donald Trump, I guess he's probably saying multiple times a day, yes, we destroyed them, we destroyed them, we destroyed them. Well, he possibly did. He possibly did a lot of destruction. However, he did not destroy all of the equipment inside because they moved that out. It's pretty well known. And you know, they destroyed maybe the sites to a large extent, and it was mostly symbolic then. But I guess Iran has started rebuilding them immediately, and you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to be building them even stronger than before. But I don't know. I would be making them deeper. I would be not only clearing out the rubble, I would, keep digging even further. Make them deeper, make them stronger. I don't know. That's how that goes. Where do I go now? Walking around here with the trees and some garbage over here. I won't show you the garbage. I've already done enough of that. Okay, well, some of the actual real news, not this quibbling back and forth who won the war and who didn't win it, but I guess, well, let me say a little bit more about that. George Galloway, he was saying that Iran had really socked it to Israel. But of course, they made it illegal in Israel. It's sort of like Ukraine, as you know. They hate the news when it's not on their side. So, but Ukraine, well, even Israel, they go around and they kill reporters. They kill reporters. So what is that? It's like, I guess that's shoot the messenger. You don't like the news, you shoot the messenger. So Israel was doing that on Palestinians and all that. And of course, they kept their Israeli reporters normally in line. And those that did not stay in line, they called them, what do they call them, self-hating Jews or something like that. It probably doesn't have anything to do with Judaism at all anyway. It has to do with Zionism, as you know. And but the Ukrainians, they just assassinate. They send bombs off. All the people the reporters that have died at the hands of Ukraine because Ukraine doesn't like the news that they report. I keep saying that they're two peas in a pod. They're so very much. It's kind of strange, because I don't know. I don't even think the Nazis did that in World War II. I don't think Hitler's people did that. But I guess that's called the neo-Nazism. You got to kill reporters when you don't like the news. Okay. And as I said, and I stand by it, they are both Nazi regimes. The Israeli regime and the Ukrainian regime. To me, this guy keeps walking back and forth. Maybe he's talking to somebody on his phone. Looks like it. He was going this way and I waited till he walked, but he keeps just going back and forth. This guy right here. Yes, okay. So other news, the same Nazi leader, but of Ukraine, he, not Netanyahu, but Ukraine, he was at the NATO summit, even though he's not in NATO. Ukraine is not in the NATO. They're sort of like a member, and Rutte was there, however he talks, and what is it called, inevitable course or movement to whatever he called it, inevitable, that they're going to inevitably be in NATO. It's weird because I've heard him say he's definitely not going to go into NATO. First he said he was, then he wasn't, then he is, and then he's not. You know how that is. It's kind of like Donald Trump or any of these Western leaders. They can't seem to make their mind up. It's terrible. You had a leader before, like this guy. If you remember, any of you guys that are older, you remember Ron Paul? He was running for president back in those days, about like 2007, and around that time. When he made up his mind, he made up his mind. He wasn't like a Mitt Romney who goes back and forth and back and forth. Mitt Romney was extreme. He was considered extreme in those days, but now you got Donald Trump. He does the same thing. Bomb or not to bomb? That is the question. But the other ones are the same. What was it? Did I hear something about Kaya Kallas? I don't. Anyway, so they're just crazy stuff anyhow. But anyway, these other leaders, first they had this NATO summit. Zelensky was there when he's not even in NATO, and I guess it kind of was a nothing burger. But then after that, they had some sort of a NATO summit, and I don't think Trump was there at all. I know an EU summit. Did I say NATO? I meant EU summit, and they made some like big ceremony. I guess it's just all for show, for show, so that everybody thinks this is really, really going to be it here. I guess it is the European. I'll get to that. I wrote it down here. Let me start from the beginning anyway. Big storms in Paris, by the way. If you guys didn't catch that, it's like hurricane, like in the Caribbean that I've experienced a few times while I was over there. A couple disasters, a volcano, just your regular stuff. A couple hurricanes, roofs blowing off of houses, things like that. You see a roof rolling down the street. How that happened, I don't know. The whole thing came off. People probably sitting there, and all of a sudden the rain comes through. I can't remember if that one had rain. They don't have to have rains. A lot of them just have strong wind. So, and then the volcanoes. I wasn't close enough myself to the volcano, and no lava or nothing anyway. But anyhow, the 12-day war. Trump, the king, the daddy, the big daddy. I guess that's what Rutte calls him, Big Daddy. Something like that, Big Daddy. Everybody is. That's big news now. Everybody is going around. Rutte called him the daddy. King Trump or something, and who was it? First and former advisor. Okay, a lot of people are saying that it was because Israel, the war ended in any way. This let me just go back talk about this war. They say that it ended because Israel was really losing their ass big time. I guess military targets. Iran was just slaughtering them, and you're only allowed, I guess, to film the civilian targets. And it wasn't even so that many of them. So that's why you didn't see too much. And you had the impression that Israel was kicking butt on Iran. But I guess it's the other way around. I guess Iran actually got the best of Israel because you weren't allowed. It was against the law to film the military targets. And I don't know if you go to jail, it was a very, very serious crime. It's to give everybody the impression that Israel was winning. That's what it's all about. And Iran was hitting military targets. And even Benjamin Netanyahu, I guess where if you guys can recall, Benjamin Netanyahu and a lot of these jokers there in Israel, they say, oh, Hamas, they put their command and control centers underneath the basements, underneath the hospitals. And that's why Israel was attacking them. And then, one time they showed something and they went into some little area there and it was like an old dusty desk and 2 rusty rifles or something like that. And they planted the rifles, by the way. Everybody knows that. And this desk, I don't know, it was probably just some old furniture. It looked like nobody could have ever been sitting in there. The place was dingy and dirty and everything. And it was dusty. It wasn't even in use. You could tell that. And they made a big deal out of it. But I guess Israel really does do that. And then they put their rocket launchers, and thanks for air defense, they put them on narrow streets. And it's not to hide, it's to use their own people as human shields. I mean, these are some really dastardly and nasty people. You would think that the people of Israel, I'll tell you what, Iran should have probably hit a lot more of them. One of them that they hit, and I guess it wasn't in too narrow of a street, but I guess they hit I think it was a intelligence command center, and I don't know if they hit any launchers or anything, but it just so happened to be somewhat near a hospital or whatever, and it blew out the windows of the hospital. Got some stuff on the inside. They had already evacuated the hospital because Iran is giving them notice prior. I think it was like, as far as that war is concerned, I think only 24 Israelis were killed or whatever, and I think it was 800 Iranians, because Israel had started also giving warnings for people to leave certain areas. You know, it's a heck of a lot better than what they did with the Gazan people. But anyway, but they didn't always do that, and they were hitting areas as well with people without giving any warning, the Israelis. But you know, they were, at least at some point in time, they started caring a little bit because it looks really bad when they're massacring a lot of people. And it's really strange because they don't care how bad they look when they're killing Gazan people, you know, people from Gaza. And you all know how that works. They tell people to leave some area and to go to a certain particular area, and then they bomb the area and they kill everybody there. And they even bomb refugee places. They tell them to go to certain areas, set up some tents. They would set up tents, people there, thinking they're safe, and then they would bomb those areas. Half the time they did, and half the time they didn't. You know, if they did it every time, then nobody would be going to any of these areas ever, and they would know that exactly that's not the place to go. But of course, Israel has probably their own satellites, and I'm sure they have a lot of American satellites telling them where everything is at, just like the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians, of course, are giving satellite intelligence, or let me see, the Americans are giving satellite intelligence to the Ukrainians, so they know exactly where to hit. And of course, they're hitting civilians very much of the time because they can't seem to be able to get through to a lot of the military things on the Russians. And as you guys all know a lot of that, but they do and they don't. The Russia doesn't really disclose that they are hitting Russian places. Trust me. They're hitting them also with chemical weapons. Russia doesn't like to talk about that so much because a lot of people wouldn't be going there. They wouldn't be enlisting if they, but I don't know how bad it is. I don't think it's really, really, really bad because I think maybe the Russians, I guess it's going to come out probably after the war that a lot of them are probably sitting around in something similar to hazmat suits, at least wearing their gas masks to avoid getting bombed by American chemicals. At least the components come from the United States, given to the Ukrainians to bomb the Russians. So anyway, there you go. Okay, let's see. What else we have here? Oh, it turns out, I think it was George Galloway, like I said, he's talking a lot about how bad Israel really got it. And there's other people coming out and saying that the one reason why they had to sue for peace in this war, the Americans were sending them bombs and things like that, but I think what they were running short of, they were running short of defensive munitions. They didn't have that many. Even though they were shooting off lots of them, they probably had hundreds of thousands of them, but they kept shooting them off. I think Iran was actually baiting them, sending a lot of these old munitions and drones and whatnot, and Israel was sending thousands and thousands of these little missiles trying to shoot up all these drones and the missiles that were coming in. And I think probably all of the hypersonics hit their targets, I'm betting. But anyway, they were running out of defensive munitions, and of course Israel probably had to be a little bit more offensive, so they were still launching offensive attacks on Iran with their jets. And of course the Americans had sent over, I think it was a little bit ill prepared. Do you think they should have had a lot more of these surface to air defense munitions? And of course Donald Trump is bragging of how great they were. It turns out they're not. Turns out they were not so great. A lot of the statistics were off, and some people are saying they only hit 50% of the missiles that were coming in from Iran, and maybe that is true. Maybe if they would have only sent old stuff and very slow ones, maybe they would have hit up to 75 or 80%, but they didn't. So it wasn't so great as what we are hearing. It's, you know, I guess the first casualty of any war is the truth, so a lot of lies coming out. I don't know about how many lies on the Iranian side. I'm sure there's a lot there too. But anyway, Israel bit off more than they can chew by attacking, it turns out. Maybe the United States too, because the United States, I don't know, it's like their baby. Israel is like their baby. I'm sometimes wondering if they care far more about Israel than they care about any state in the United States. I mean, a lot of you probably already know that. You know, you have all these Zionists. You listen to Ted Cruz, listen to any of these guys. Sometimes you go to their websites from these congressmen and these senators, and there's a lot more about Israel than there is about the United States on there. How Israel's best friend. One of them had that as the title. The title of their website, United States senator, I believe. Israel's best friend, written in the biggest letters on the entire site. So I don't even know who that was, but obviously Ted Cruz feels that way, and so do many, many others. It looks like Candace Owens is really pissed off now too. She's pretty much dumped Trump, said he was a big disappointment and it wasn't want anything to do with him now. You know, and I'm not quite so far. I don't know about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think she's kind of being a little bit reserved. I think maybe even Tucker Carlson is, but a lot of these people are not very happy with Donald Trump because the things that Donald Trump promised are the things he did not deliver. He did exactly the opposite, you know? And so he was, Donald Trump, it's just like Israel, you know? They saw that they kind of bit off too much. They didn't, what the term is, they bit off more than they can chew. And Donald Trump, he thought he was going to be able to bamboozle everybody and think, you know, oh yes, well this time the foreign war is going to be great. You know, he even said, somebody put up a tweet exactly what he said. Oh, this is all bad, you know, bombing this and bombing Iran and all that. And then he did exactly what he said was very bad. I think maybe back in 2019 or whatever, when Donald Trump put up some tweet. Really incredible. Okay. And now, I mentioned yesterday, of course, that Iran is kicking out the IAEA. And the reasons, of course, the wind comes up right when I have to need this paper. Okay, what were the reasons? The reasons has nothing to do with building a nuclear weapon. It is, well, I guess there's two reasons, and you guys will sympathize with that as well. Having IAEA inspectors is supposed to, you know, because they have access, and they're supposed to get unhindered access to any place that they really want, except for other sensitive places. And they can determine even by satellite, they can determine by detectors if those sites that they are not allowed to go to have any sort of radioactive material in that. And those were missile places. They said they're not allowed to go into the missile places because, as you know, spies, everybody has a price. You pay them enough and anybody will be a spy. So anyway, they had unhindered access to all of these places. The IAEA, you know, I guess there was some real fake report, you know, and I even read it and I was thinking, wow, I guess they were making nuclear bombs or getting close to it. Nobody ever said they had uranium enriched to 90%. I guess the maximum anybody is actually saying is 60%. So you still have to get to 90%. I don't know what it takes to go to 90%. Probably something much more special, but it wasn't happening. And in any case, even Rafael Grossi, he was frantic. He was coming out every single day when all this hostility started, and he'd say, they're not making nuclear weapons, they're not making nuclear weapons, but nobody was listening to him anymore. I don't even know if he was somehow coerced to say that they were pursuing a nuclear weapon before that, because there was some sort of a report coming out. You guys all know that, but I don't know, maybe they fudged the words around. I don't know, because what I was reading, it sounded like it was kind of I don't know, damning or something. But anyway, one reason why they are not, Iran is kicking out the IAEA is because why should they have them there? Why should they have these people going around snooping around when they gave no protection whatsoever to Iran? I mean, it didn't stop them. It didn't stop them from getting bombed. They still got bombed. I guess that's the first time in history that happened. And the bigger question is, why aren't they inspecting Israel's nuclear? And Israel does have nuclear bombs. You know, they don't even have to inspect their program to see if they're making nuclear bombs, because the entire earth knows that they have nuclear bombs. They just don't come out and admit it. You know, when you're an Israeli, I guess you're allowed to lie. You know, just like American. If you're American, you got license. You got license to do whatever you want to do. There are no rules. I mean, talking about the American government. There are no rules. You don't have any rules. The rules don't exist for Israelis in the government and Americans. They can do anything that they damn well please. No restrictions whatsoever. The rules are made for you guys. They're made for the other guys, especially if it's your Belarus or if you're Russia or someplace like that. You guys got to go by the rules. Well, especially Iran, I guess. So anyhow, okay. So let's see, about 2/3 of the IAEA budget was used, can you believe this, more than that actually, was used to monitor Iran. So in other words, lately, it's nearly the entire budget of the IAEA was used to monitor Iran. I even have the more, it's actually even higher than that. Let me give you the figures right here. Let's see, the budget for the IAEA, the total budget annually is 35 million US dollars. $22 million of that was spent in monitoring Iran. So in other words, the purpose of the IAEA has been just to monitor Iran. That's what its purpose has been lately. So I wonder what's going to happen now they get kicked out. So what are they going to do? The truth is, I don't know, is that under, I think that's under the United Nations. So they're going to save quite a bit of money there. Tens of millions of dollars. You know, it's like they could have saved a lot of money instead of sending it to Ukraine. They could save a lot of money instead of sending it to Israel. Can you imagine? I think it was even Jimmy Dore talking about you wouldn't have any homeless, no homeless, absolutely zero in America if they didn't send these things to Ukraine and to Israel. It would be gone, no homeless. It would not exist in America. It's incredible. Okay. Another thing, what was it? More money here. It is now disclosed. Tucker Carlson had some kind of a guest on there, and I knew this stuff. I've been talking to you guys about this sort of thing. You know, I didn't know about this specifically, but I know about it when you have like these riots and color revolutions and things like that over here in Europe, and it's a known fact. It's very strange, and I tell you what, if I were part of the news over here in Belarus, I would be announcing this stuff, what goes on, because it happened in Belarus big time. You know, they have rich people, and for the most part, it's George Soros and his Open Society Foundation, and they pay for people to go to these protests. They pay for the buses. They give you food. They give everything. And they went so far in the United States with the George Floyd riots. They flew people up. They put them on jet airplanes and they flew them to Minneapolis. They flew them there. They flew them by probably in all. They probably sent many thousands there to protest and say that George Floyd is the new Jesus. I mean, can you imagine this crap? You know, I mean. You gotta be fair. A drug dealer, a porno star can be a new Jesus. I mean, why not? Why not? This is the new world, baby. A pedophile, that's probably what's gonna happen next. The pedophile will be the new Jesus. A pedophile murderer. I think I don't know if George Floyd murdered anybody. He robbed somebody at the point of a gun, and he was a big drug addict himself. You know, and of course he really died. He died from a drug overdose. That's a known fact according to the coroner. But nobody, I'll tell you what, when the whole world starts getting all riled up, or at least the United States, you're not allowed to come out and tell the truth. You're going to be shouted down no matter what anyway. It's not going to happen. You're a liar! He was killed. Some guy put his knee on his neck. That's what killed him. Choked him off. Even though he was walking around and saying, I can't breathe before that, because that's, I guess, what an overdose of fentanyl does. Restricts your breathing. So anyway, I don't know, would I have gone if they said, hey, you got a free trip to Minneapolis? I've never been to Minneapolis. Anyway, all expenses paid, all the meals, everything like that. Wow, thank you, George Soros. I don't know how much of that George Soros paid, but he definitely was a financial contributor to that. That's a known fact. Anyway, and I knew that before. Just like BLM. BLM was definitely started by George Soros. He was one of the founders. Obama, George Soros, two bankers in California, and then there was this black guy that was supposed to be the leader of it at that time. You know, and they all met together, those three anyway. And I don't know if the bankers, because they were in California, you know, that were laundering all this money through there and all that. And, you know, these people, and who was that lady that was part of this, the leadership of the BLM? She got a lot of money. She got millions. She was buying real estate all over. And it's really strange. She was buying houses and they were in white neighborhoods. She didn't buy them in any black neighborhoods. She bought them in white neighborhoods. I guess that's a fact too. You know, this stuff comes out pretty soon, you know. People play their cards, I guess you could say. Okay, so Zelensky and his EU buddies are setting up that tribunal. It's not just to go after Putin, it's to go after Russia at all. So, you know, all the big fanfare I was just telling you about, it's incredible. I'll bet you Putin and all of them are wetting their pants like you'd never believe right now. Yeah. It's a very strange thing. They didn't mention that 14,000 people that Ukraine killed in the Donbass because they spoke Russian. They didn't mention that for 8 years, you know. And Putin says that his biggest crime is he didn't go in earlier. He did not start the military operation earlier because he feels guilty probably for the fact that there's like 14,000 people that the Ukrainians killed. You know, at that time it was their own people killing their own people. I don't know. I guess when you're a buddy of the United States, you can do anything. You know, like I was just saying, you know, Israel can get away with anything. The United States can do everything. There is no wrong. There are no rules. And I guess if you're a big buddy, if you're a big, a tool or a little pawn or something in the hands of the United States, you can do anything too, you know, until mission accomplished. You know, we used to call something, it was called mission oriented. And I knew some officers like that. And when I was in the Army, you know, and they don't care, you know, and I've been told that, you know, you kind of get, if you don't do something, you know, how do I explain this? Say you have a mission, what you have to do, for example, even if it's in war games and things like that, say you have to go over to this one area and move like a, I can't even make an example because I can't even remember what it was about, but you get chewed out, even if it's tramping over private citizens, German citizens, through their gardens, you know, smashing their flowers and all that kind of stuff, or whatever, driving a vehicle across their lawn when it's all muddy, so you screw up their entire lawn, you screw up, you know, you leave a matter of fact, yeah, that's what it was. As a matter of fact, it was a big truck. You'd have a big 5-ton trucks, they drive across some German's land just to get to some point, because if you go the long way around, it's going to take too long. So you screw up their lawn, and if you don't do that, you know, you're in deep crap. But what happens when you do that? You're also in deep crap. You know, you get chewed out by the colonel. So what would you rather do? Would you get chewed out by the captain, the mission-oriented captain, you know, by ruining somebody's land, you know, lawn, you know, big lawn? Or do you want to get chewed out by the lieutenant colonel? Because I think he can chew out a little bit harder. So you don't do it, you know, and then you get in trouble, and then you get on, what do they call that? I don't know. Has something to do with the SHIT word, and I don't want to say it. So you get on that sort of detail if you don't do what you're supposed to do. I don't know. And then you get in these positions, you know, if you're maybe not quite as favored, and you get in a position where you have to make these bad decisions, and you know, in any case. Anyway, I can have other little stories that I come up with in the military, but that captain mission oriented, and you are not, because you did not drive through that lawn. But see how that works when the lieutenant colonel chews you out. Okay, anyway. Old Zelensky. I don't know, so I guess he did get something. He maybe didn't get his candies and toys and everything from the NATO summit so much, but he did get it from there. I'm sure they're still giving him plenty of money, you know? As long as it takes. Okay. Piers Morgan, he had a guest. And you know, Piers Morgan, he's kind of an enigma too. You never know what the heck that guy's going to come up with. You know, he had that little argument with Roger Waters before, you know, and Roger Waters was holding his ground, and I guess he, for the most part, agrees with Roger Waters now, you know, about the killing and all that in Gaza. But a lot of that was, I don't know, maybe, I'll bet you Piers Morgan still believes that that Hamas was raping Israelis. Yeah, as if they really had the time to do that while they were trying to gather hostages and under heavy attack with Apache helicopters with flamethrowers. I'm sure they said, well, let's go rape these women, you know, while we're waiting to get ourselves burned up. You know, in other words, it's all fake anyway. There's no evidence whatsoever. There's no witnesses, no, except for maybe a few liars maybe in the military, a few, probably very few, no civilian witnesses, none whatsoever, that there was any kind of rapes going on or nothing. I don't even know if any of the Palestinians, because, you know, they're not allowed. It's just like Just like you're not allowed to photograph any of those military installations that Iran hit. If you come out and if you talk to the press, this is the honest to God truth. If you were under Hamas, if you were a hostage and you come out and you go to the press, you have to pay a huge fine to the Israeli government, because they don't want anybody to hear that Hamas is not what they're trying to portray them to be. And that's the honest to God truth. Yes, so fines if you go out and you tell isn't that incredible? But that's democracy, as you all know. Okay, the only democracy in the Middle East. But anyway, there's also people saying that Israel is pissed off. Well, actually, I'll tell you what they are pissed off about, and what the real truth is, what this guy said, this guy named Trita Parsi. I don't even know what his nationality is, what kind of name is that? But anyway, Piers Morgan let him talk, and he gave about the best analysis of the so-called 12-day war, because he was critical of Iran in some parts and part of Israel, and he really told it unbiased, I believe. And he was saying that Israel is very upset with Donald Trump for putting the brakes on, because they wanted Trump to be bombing a lot more than just those 3 sites. So maybe that was Trump's deal, trying to look or be reserved and trying to maybe compromise, meet a little halfway ground, and just by bombing those, and that is it. And told Iran, you better not retaliate on the Americans. And it looks like Iran did not want to escalate, so they did not attack Americans. Maybe something a little symbolic, I don't know. Who would want to go to war with the United States? Well, I'll tell you what, if they do something to Russia, Russia will strike back. I don't think the United States wants to go to war against Russia in Russia's backyard. That would be my assessment. Okay. Anyway, Trump put the brakes on. Netanyahu did not like that at all, because I don't know, I think Trump's payback was just to get those sites. So I think paid in full for putting him in the White House, I believe. So I believe now Trump is going to stay out of that, because I think he deep down knows that that's real stupid to get himself in another war when he promised not to. So I think you can kind of play that right there, and you see what was actually going on. Trump made a compromise. Okay. That's my assessment anyway. Okay. And as I was already saying, I already jumped the gun, and Israel was hiding the severe damage. And I guess there's thousands of buildings that are very badly damaged. And I think maybe over 1,000 that important buildings that Iran destroyed. But nobody's allowed to photograph them, so you're not allowed to get the evidence. Isn't that incredible? Make sure there is no evidence, I guess. So can't destroy the evidence, because then that would be evidence in and of itself. So I don't know. No cameras. Anyway, that's about all the news. There's not that much news. It's only like 30 minutes. Like I said, it's a big. If you're hunting for news, it's a letdown. I'm actually kind of happy that things are quieting down, at least for right now. And it looks like that's probably going to start again. I don't think Israel is going to rest. I think they're going to lick their wounds. They're going to get some more ammunition, and they're going to go at it again. But don't think that Iran is going to be going to sleep. I hope they're going to get some help from Russia and from China, because you damn well know that the United States is going to help Israel big time. And those factories are going to open up, probably another factory building these air defense missiles, and we're going to see this happen again. The question is when. So anyhow, that's all I have to report for today. And I don't know, stay safe and enjoy the peace, at least at the moment, while we have it. Unless you're in Paris or some other place where something's going on. Okay, I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Thanks.